As his pregnant wife was being wheeled into surgery, he thought having lunch with his mistress was more important. But when he arrived at the restaurant, his lawyer was waiting, with a folder and a truth that could change everything. The corner office on the 42nd floor offered a panoramic view of Chicago's skyline, but Thatcher Blackwood wasn't admiring the scenery. His steel-grey eyes were fixed on the nervous young analyst trembling before his desk. "Explain to me again why we should pass on the Meridian acquisition," Thatcher said, his voice deceptively calm as he leaned back in his Italian leather chair. At 42, he cut an imposing figure, tall, broad-shouldered, with salt-and-pepper hair that only enhanced his air of authority. The analyst, Kevin or Keith Thatcher couldn't be bothered to remember, clutched his portfolio tighter. "Sir, the numbers don't support it. Their debt ratio is concerning, and there are rumors about pending litigation that—" "Rumors?" Thatcher raised a single finger, silencing the young man instantly. "While you were chasing rumors, Meridian stock dropped 12%. Do you know what that means?" "That we'd be buying at a discount?" the analyst ventured. Thatcher's smile didn't reach his eyes. "It means we could have acquired them for nearly 40 million less if you'd moved when I first told you to." He turned his chair to face the Chicago skyline. "Clear your desk by end of day. Your severance will reflect this oversight." When the door closed behind the shattered analyst, Thatcher swiveled back to his desk. He pressed the intercom. "Sarah, get me Lawrence Miller at Goldman. Tell him we're ready to move on Meridian, and have PR prepare a statement about market confidence." "Right away, Mr. Blackwood," his assistant responded, knowing better than to question his decisions. This was how he'd built Blackwood Investments, from nothing into a powerhouse worth billions. Decisive action while others hesitated, ruthlessness when necessary, and an uncanny ability to see opportunities others missed. The world divided neatly into winners and losers, and Thatcher had decided long ago which category he would occupy. His cell phone vibrated with a text. "Vivian, doctor's appointment at 2. Will you make it?" Thatcher frowned, checking his Patek Philippe watch. He had the Miller call, then the board meeting at 3. He typed a quick response. "Can't today, closing Meridian deal, dinner tonight?" Her reply came almost instantly. "Okay, love you." A twinge of something, not quite guilt, passed through him. Vivian would understand, she always did. That was why their marriage worked, despite their differences. His phone buzzed again, this time with a message from a different contact. "Penthouse Suite, 4 p.m. Wear the blue tie." His pulse quickened as he slipped the phone into his pocket. The Meridian acquisition would close nicely before his other appointment. The car service dropped Thatcher at their Gold Coast condominium at 7:30 p.m. The doorman greeted him with practiced deference as he made his way to the private elevator. Their 3-story penthouse occupied the top floors of one of Chicago's most exclusive buildings, with floor-to-ceiling windows showcasing Lake Michigan. "Vivian?" he called, setting his briefcase down on the marble entryway table. "On the terrace," her voice called back. He found her wrapped in a cashmere throw, watching the sunset over the lake. At 34, Vivian Blackwood retained the warm, genuine quality that had first attracted him to her, a refreshing contrast to the calculated personalities he encountered in his professional life. Her auburn hair caught the fading sunlight, and her hands rested protectively over her 7-month pregnant belly. "How was the appointment?" he asked, bending to kiss her cheek. "Good." She smiled up at him. "Aurora's heartbeat is strong. The doctor's very pleased with her development, especially given—" She trailed off, neither of them wanting to verbalize the memory of their previous losses. "That's excellent news." Thatcher poured himself a scotch from the terrace bar. "The Meridian deal closed. Stock's already up 6 points in after-hours trading." Vivian studied him. "You fired someone today, didn't you?" He paused mid-sip. "How could you possibly know that?" "You get a certain look, right around your eyes." She touched her own temple. "Like you're carrying tension there." This was why Vivian unsettled him sometimes, her ability to read him when he prided himself on being inscrutable to everyone else. "Some analyst who couldn't see what was right in front of him," he dismissed. "The market doesn't reward hesitation." "Neither does Thatcher Blackwood," she said, with a gentle smile that somehow wasn't accusatory. "I was thinking we could host a fundraiser for the Children's Hospital next month, before Aurora arrives." Thatcher suppressed a sigh. Vivian's charitable endeavors, a holdover from her days as a pediatric nurse, were one of their recurring points of contention. "Is that wise in your condition? You should be resting." The event planner will handle everything. I'd just make some calls. She reached for his hand. These children need advocates, Thatcher. People with influence. People with money, you mean? He finished his scotch. Fine. Have Sarah set it up, but keep your involvement minimal. Her smile was worth the concession. Thank you. I was thinking we could donate a new NICU wing. After everything we've been through, it feels right. Thatcher nodded absently, already calculating the tax advantages. Whatever you want, I need to shower before dinner. As he walked away, he heard her call after him. The blue tie looked good on you today. He froze momentarily, then continued without responding. She couldn't know it was just a coincidence. The SEC is looking into Carson Financial's foreign transactions, Donovan Pierce said quietly, adjusting his wire-rimmed glasses as he settled into the leather chair across from Thatcher's desk the next morning. Donovan, short, slight, perpetually rumpled despite his expensive suits, didn't look like the power player he was. As Thatcher's personal attorney and oldest friend, he was the only person who knew all of Blackwood Investments' secrets, and all of Thatcher's. Should we be concerned? Thatcher asked, not looking up from his computer. Not directly, but your personal entanglement with their senior analyst might warrant caution. Now Thatcher met his friend's gaze. There's nothing that connects me to their business practices. Donovan's expression remained neutral. Melanie Carson is the CEO's niece. If they're moving dirty money and you're sharing pillow talk with her, it's not like that, Thatcher cut him off. It's just sex. We don't discuss business. The FBI won't see it that way if Carson Financial goes down. Donovan placed a folder on the desk. Just be careful. Don't give them anything they could use against you. Thatcher waved dismissively. You worry too much. Always have, since Princeton. One of us has to, Donovan replied dryly. How's Vivian? Getting close now, isn't it? 7 months. Thatcher's expression softened imperceptibly. Everything looks good this time. I'm glad. She deserves this happiness, you both do. Donovan stood. Send her my best, and think about what I said. After Donovan left, Thatcher opened his private email. A message from Melanie awaited. Information about Jefferson merger. Very sensitive. Meet today? His pulse quickened. The Jefferson merger was the biggest deal on Wall Street, and Carson Financial was advising the other side. This was exactly the kind of edge that had made him wealthy. He typed back, usual place, noon. The Four Seasons luxury suite had become their regular meeting spot, convenient to both their offices and discreet enough for their purposes. Melanie Carson was already waiting when he arrived, 29, ambitious, with sharp features and sharper instincts. I can only stay an hour, she said as he closed the door. Uncle Richard is watching everyone closely with this SEC business. Then we shouldn't waste time, Thatcher replied, loosening his tie, the blue one. Later, as they lay among tangled sheets, Melanie propped herself on one elbow. Jefferson is undervaluing their tech division in the merger filings, she said casually, by about 30%. Thatcher kept his expression neutral, despite the surge of interest. That's noteworthy. It gets better. She traced a finger down his chest. They're announcing a major patent approval next week. Stock will jump at least 20 points. How did you come by this information? He asked carefully. She smiled. Does it matter? Just be sure to cover your tracks if you use it. As he dressed to leave, Thatcher felt the familiar rush of having information no one else possessed. This was power, the kind he understood and valued above all else. His phone rang as he was leaving the hotel, Vivian's number. I'm heading into a meeting, he answered. Can I call you? Thatcher. Her voice was strained, tight with panic. Something's wrong. I'm bleeding. A lot. His body went cold. Where are you? Home. I called an ambulance. They're taking me to Northwestern Memorial. I'll meet you there, he said automatically. Don't worry, everything will be fine. He disconnected, already calculating. Northwestern was 15 minutes away. He had the Jefferson information now. His meeting with the lawyers at Gibson's Steakhouse was in 30 minutes, crucial for the Meridian integration. Surely the doctors would need time to assess Vivian's condition before he could even see her. The Northwestern Memorial emergency room was controlled chaos. Thatcher found a nurse who directed him to labor and delivery, where a Dr. Levine was waiting for him, a stern-faced woman in her 50s with tired eyes. Mr. Blackwood, she said briskly, your wife has placenta previa, a condition where the placenta is covering the cervix. She's experiencing significant bleeding. which puts both her and the baby at risk. Risk, Thatcher repeated, the word feeling foreign on his tongue. Risk was something he managed, controlled, leveraged for profit, not something that threatened his wife and unborn child. We need to perform an emergency C-section, Dr. Levine continued. The baby will be premature, but it's safer than allowing the pregnancy to continue. They led him to a pre-op room where Vivian lay pale against white sheets, monitors beeping around her. When she saw him, relief flooded her face. "You're here," she whispered, reaching for his hand. "Of course I'm here," he replied, surprised by his own emotion. "I'm scared, Thatcher," she admitted, clutching his fingers. "What if we lose her like the others?" "We won't," he said with the same confidence he used to close billion-dollar deals. "Aurora is a fighter, like her mother." A nurse entered. "We're ready to prep Mrs. Blackwood for surgery now." Vivian's grip tightened. "Stay with me, please." Thatcher checked his watch reflexively. The Gibsons' meeting was in 15 minutes. The Jefferson information would be worthless if he couldn't act on it immediately. Vivian would be under anesthesia soon anyway. She wouldn't know if he stepped out briefly. "Let me make a quick call to reschedule my meeting," he said smoothly. "I'll be right back." In the hallway, he texted both his assistant and Melanie. "Emergency with Vivian. Can't make Gibsons. Heading there now anyway. Meet me there at 2 p.m. sharp. Critical." He returned to Vivian's side just as they were preparing to move her. "I'll be waiting when you're out," he promised, kissing her forehead. Her eyes, trusting and afraid, followed him as the nurses wheeled her away. Thatcher approached the nurses' station. "How long will the surgery take?" "Probably an hour, but Dr. Levine will need to speak with you immediately after." He nodded. Gibson's was only 10 minutes away. He could get there, share the Jefferson information with his team, and be back before Vivian was out of surgery. She'd never know, and he'd have secured their financial future, Aurora's future. "I need to get some documents from my office for the insurance," he lied smoothly. "I'll be back within the hour." Outside, he texted his driver, "Gibson's Steakhouse. Now." Traffic was mercifully light, allowing him to reach the restaurant with time to spare. Thatcher straightened his tie, the blue one, and reminded himself that this was for his family. Information like this came along once in a career, and with Aurora's medical needs, the timing couldn't be better. The maître d' greeted him by name. "Your usual table in the back, Mr. Blackwood. Your guest is already waiting." Thatcher frowned. "Guest?" Melanie shouldn't have arrived yet. As he approached the secluded booth, his steps faltered. Instead of Melanie's sleek frame and calculated smile, he found Donovan Pierce sitting alone, a brown leather portfolio on the table before him. "What are you doing here?" Thatcher asked, sliding into the booth despite his confusion. Donovan regarded him calmly. "I think the better question is, what are you doing here?" Thatcher's mind raced. Had Melanie told Donovan about their meeting? That made no sense. "I'm meeting my team about the Meridian integration," he lied. "What's this about?" "I received a call from Dr. Levine 20 minutes ago," Donovan said quietly. "Vivian is being prepped for emergency surgery right now. They couldn't find you." Thatcher felt his carefully constructed world begin to crack. "I told them I had to get insurance documents." "To meet with Melanie Carson?" Donovan's voice remained even, but his eyes were steel. "While your wife and daughter fight for their lives. How did you—" "The hospital called me as your emergency contact when they couldn't reach you. Your secretary told them you were heading to Gibson's." Donovan leaned forward. "Who are you, Thatcher?" "The man who leaves his wife during an emergency to meet his mistress. Is that who you've become?" Thatcher's phone buzzed with an incoming text. It was from the hospital. "Mr. Blackwood, please return immediately. Complications with Mrs. Blackwood's surgery. Doctor needs to speak with you urgently." He stared at the message, then at Donovan, the restaurant suddenly spinning around him. "What have I done?" he whispered. "That," said Donovan, opening the leather portfolio, "is exactly what I wanted to ask you." Thatcher stared at the leather portfolio Donovan had placed between them, his mind still processing the hospital's urgent message. "What is this?" he finally asked, his voice barely audible over the restaurant's ambient noise. Donovan slid several surveillance photos across the table. "These were taken over the past 3 months. You and Melanie entering the Four Seasons, having dinner at Alenia, getting into your car outside her apartment. The images were crisp, professional, unmistakably the work of someone who knew what they were doing." Thatcher's throat tightened. "You had me followed?" The betrayal from his oldest friend cut deeper than he would have expected. "No." Donovan shook his head. These were shown to me yesterday by Special Agent Harmon of the FBI. They've been watching Melanie Carson for months as part of their investigation into Carson Financial. Thatcher's pulse pounded in his ears as Donovan continued. She's not who you think she is, Thatcher. She's been systematically extracting information from you about your clients, your trading strategies, anything that might help her uncle's firm. That's absurd, Thatcher scoffed, but uncertainty crept into his voice. We never discuss the Jefferson merger, Donovan interrupted. The SEC flagged unusual trading patterns around every major deal you've made since your relationship with her began. They have recordings, Thatcher. Her apartment was bugged. The floor seemed to drop away beneath Thatcher's feet. Recordings of what? Everything. Donovan's gaze was unflinching, including her phone calls back to Carson Financial immediately after your meetings. She's been playing you from the beginning. Thatcher's mind raced through every conversation, every seemingly casual question Melanie had asked about his business dealings. The Jefferson information today, had that been bait for a trap? Why are you telling me this? He demanded. If you're working with the FBI, because despite everything, you're still my friend. Donovan leaned forward. And because I made a promise to Vivian years ago that I'd look out for you, even when you couldn't see the damage you were doing to yourself. Thatcher's phone buzzed again with another message from the hospital. Critical situation. Dr. Levine needs to speak with you immediately. Cold dread washed over him. I have to go. The FBI is preparing to move on Carson Financial next week, Donovan said as Thatcher stood. When they do, everyone connected to their operation will go down with them, including you, unless you cooperate. I can't deal with this right now, Thatcher snapped, already moving toward the exit. Thatcher, Donovan called after him. For once in your life, put someone else first. Vivian needs you. The Chicago streets blurred as Thatcher's driver raced toward Northwestern Memorial. Rain had begun to fall, streaking the windows and turning the cityscape into a watery smear of lights and shadows, not unlike Thatcher's thoughts as he tried to process Donovan's revelations. Melanie had been using him. All those intimate moments, the secrets shared in private. She'd been reporting back to her uncle the entire time. The betrayal stung more than he cared to admit, but what truly shook him was the realization that he'd been outsmarted. Someone had calculated his weaknesses, exploited them methodically, and he, who prided himself on seeing 3 moves ahead in every situation, had fallen for it completely. His phone rang. The hospital again. Mr. Blackwood, said Dr. Levine's tense voice, I've been trying to reach you. We've had to rush your wife into surgery. She's experiencing severe hemorrhaging, and the baby is in distress. I'm 5 minutes away, he said, his voice sounding foreign to his own ears. You need to understand the gravity of the situation, the doctor continued. We may have to make difficult decisions. If it comes to a choice, save them both, Thatcher interrupted, unwilling to hear the alternatives. Whatever it takes, money is no object. A bitter laugh nearly escaped him at his own words. Money is no object, as if his wealth, the measuring stick by which he judged his entire life, meant anything in this moment. We're doing everything we can, Doctor, Levine said before disconnecting. Thatcher closed his eyes, memories flooding back unbidden. Vivian in the hospital after their first miscarriage, her face hollow with grief, but still reassuring him that they would try again. Vivian volunteering at the children's hospital during her days off, returning home with stories of small victories and heartbreaking defeats. Vivian asking him just once to attend a fundraiser with her instead of a business dinner, accepting his refusal with that same gentle smile that never judged him. What had he given her in return? A life of luxury, but not presence. Security, but not partnership. A husband who left her during an emergency to meet his mistress, a mistress who had been using him all along. Faster, he ordered the driver, though they were already pushing the speed limit through the rain-slicked streets. Northwestern Memorial's lobby was a blur as Thatcher rushed through, ignoring the startled looks from staff who recognized the man who had left his wife barely an hour earlier. He took the stairs rather than wait for the elevator, racing up to the surgical floor where a nurse intercepted him. Mr. Blackwood, Dr. Levine is still in surgery with your wife. Please wait here. How is she? The baby? He demanded. The nurse's carefully neutral expression told him everything. The doctor will speak with you as soon as possible. Thatcher paced the waiting area, his mind cycling between Vivian's situation and Donovan's warnings about the FBI. His empire, built through ruthless determination, and now, he realized, possibly tainted by insider information from Melanie, could crumble overnight. But for the first time, that thought didn't consume him. Instead, images of Vivian kept surfacing. Vivian reading in bed, one hand resting on her pregnant belly. Vivian laughing at some silly joke. Vivian's face when the doctor had confirmed this pregnancy might actually succeed where others had failed. Nearly 40 minutes passed before Dr. Levine appeared, surgical cap still on, exhaustion evident in her stance. "Mr. Blackwood," she began, and something in her tone made his heart stutter. "Are they—" He couldn't finish the question. "Your daughter has been delivered and transferred to the NICU," Dr. Levine said. "She's 7 weeks premature and weighs just over 4 pounds. Her respiratory system is underdeveloped, so she's on ventilator support, but she's stable for now." Relief washed through him, but was quickly tempered by the doctor's continued grave expression. "And my wife," Dr. Levine sighed. "Mrs. Blackwood experienced severe hemorrhaging during the procedure. We've managed to control the bleeding, but she lost a significant amount of blood. She's in recovery now, but the next 24 hours will be critical." Thatcher felt the floor tilt beneath him. He steadied himself against the wall. "Can I see her?" The doctor hesitated. "There's something else you should know, Mr. Blackwood. Your wife regained consciousness briefly during a critical moment in the surgery. She was asking for you." Shame burned through him, knowing he hadn't been there. When the nurse explained you had left the hospital, Mrs. Blackwood became agitated. She mentioned another name, Melanie, and asked if that's where you were. Her blood pressure dropped dangerously after that episode. Thatcher closed his eyes, the full weight of his betrayal crushing down on him. Somehow Vivian had known. All this time she'd known. "When she stabilizes," Dr. Levine continued, "she can have visitors. But I should tell you, Mr. Blackwood, she left specific instructions that she doesn't wish to see you when she wakes up." The words hit like a physical blow. Thatcher had been rejected by clients, outmaneuvered by competitors, even disowned by his father decades ago, but nothing had prepared him for this. Vivian, who had forgiven his every neglect, his every failure as a husband, had finally drawn a line. "I understand," he managed, "but my daughter, can I see her?" Dr. Levine's expression softened slightly. "Yes, follow me to the NICU." The neonatal intensive care unit was a different world. Hushed voices, gentle beeping of monitors, and the palpable tension of life hanging in precarious balance. Dr. Levine led Thatcher to a small incubator surrounded by equipment that seemed impossibly large compared to the tiny figure inside. "This is Aurora," the doctor said softly. Thatcher stared through the clear plastic at his daughter. She was impossibly small, her skin nearly translucent with a maze of tubes and wires connected to her fragile body. Her chest rose and fell in shallow, rapid breaths assisted by the ventilator. Her eyes were closed, her tiny fists curled beside her face. Something shifted inside Thatcher, a tectonic movement in a place he'd thought long solidified. This wasn't an abstract concept anymore, not just a future Blackwood heir or an extension of his legacy. This was his daughter, fighting for every breath, while he had been busy protecting his secrets and his fortune. "Can I—" He hesitated, unfamiliar with uncertainty. "Can I touch her?" A nurse nodded. "Through the ports on the side. Just be very gentle." Thatcher carefully inserted his hand through the circular opening in the incubator. With a tenderness he hadn't known he possessed, he extended one finger toward Aurora's tiny hand. Her fingers, impossibly small yet perfectly formed, reflexively curled around his fingertip. The simple contact broke something in him. A single tear tracked down his face, perhaps the first he'd shed since childhood. "She's stronger than she looks," the nurse said kindly. "Preemies are fighters." "Like her mother," Thatcher whispered. As he stood there, connected to his daughter by the fragilest of holds, his phone vibrated in his pocket. He ignored it, unwilling to break this moment. It vibrated again, insistently. Finally, reluctantly, he withdrew his hand and checked the message. It was from an unknown number. "Mr. Blackwood, this is Special Agent Harmon, FBI. We need to speak with you regarding Carson financial and potential securities violations. Please call this number immediately." A second message followed. "Agents are en route to Northwestern Memorial. Cooperation will be viewed favorably by prosecutors." The walls of his carefully constructed world were not just cracking now. They were collapsing entirely. The FBI was coming for him here, now, while his wife lay unconscious and his newborn daughter fought for life just inches away. Thatcher looked back at Aurora, so vulnerable in her plastic sanctuary. What world had he created for her to enter? What legacy had his choices left for his child? "Mr. Blackwood?" A new voice spoke from behind him. He turned to find two people in dark suits standing in the NICU doorway. The woman stepped forward, showing her credentials. "Special Agent Harmon, FBI. This is Special Agent Teller. We need to ask you some questions about your relationship with Melanie Carson and your trading activities over the past 6 months." Thatcher looked from the agents to his daughter and back again. For the first time in his adult life, he had no strategy, no angle, no clever escape route planned. "My wife just had emergency surgery," he said, his voice rough. "My daughter was born 7 weeks early. Can this wait?" "I'm afraid not, sir," Agent Harmon replied without emotion. "Carson financial executives are being taken into custody as we speak. Melanie Carson has already implicated you in multiple instances of securities fraud and insider trading. The final betrayal. Of course, Melanie would save herself at his expense. You have a choice, Mr. Blackwood," Agent Teller added. "You can come with us voluntarily to answer questions, or we can arrest you here and now." Thatcher looked once more at Aurora, her tiny chest rising and falling with each assisted breath. What would Vivian want him to do? What kind of father did he want to be for this child? "I'll cooperate," he said finally, "but I need a moment with my daughter first." The agents exchanged glances, then nodded. "1 minute." Thatcher turned back to the incubator and carefully placed his hand through the port again. Aurora's fingers found his once more, holding on with surprising strength for something so small. "I'll make this right," he whispered to her. Somehow. As the agents led him away, Thatcher caught sight of Donovan Pierce entering the NICU waiting area, concern etched across his features. Their eyes met briefly, a moment of understanding passing between them. This was the beginning of the end for Thatcher Blackwood, as he had known himself. But perhaps, he thought as he took one last look toward the NICU, it could also be a beginning of something else entirely. "Let me be absolutely clear, Mr. Blackwood." Special Agent Harmon's voice cut through the stale air of the FBI field office's interrogation room. Carson Financial wasn't just bending rules. They were orchestrating a sophisticated money laundering operation for several international clients. "Your insider trading activities are just the tip of the iceberg." Thatcher sat across from her, his usually immaculate appearance now disheveled after 12 hours of questioning. He'd refused counsel, a decision Donovan had strongly advised against, insisting he needed to get back to the hospital as quickly as possible. "I had no knowledge of money laundering," he said, for what felt like the 100th time. "My relationship with Melanie Carson was personal." Agent Teller, who had been silently observing, slid a folder across the table. "Personal enough that you traded based on information she fed you about the Jefferson merger, the Westland acquisition, the Apex Tech IPO?" Thatcher didn't touch the folder. "I made those trades based on market analysis." "Remarkably prescient analysis," Agent Harmon noted dryly. "Always just before major non-public announcements." Thatcher's mind raced. Every trade they mentioned had been wildly profitable, and each had followed casual conversations with Melanie. He'd been careful, spreading the trades across different accounts, different timelines, but clearly not careful enough. "What does Melanie say about all this?" he asked. The agents exchanged glances. "Ms. Carson is cooperating fully," Teller replied. "She claims you actively solicited insider information and used your relationship to gain trading advantages. The betrayal shouldn't have stung given everything else, but it did. In Melanie's version, he wasn't just a mark, he was a willing co-conspirator." "That's not true," Thatcher said quietly. "Prove it," Harmon challenged. "Cooperate with our investigation. If you were manipulated, help us build that case." Thatcher stared at his reflection in the metal table. The man looking back at him was a stranger, haggard, compromised, cornered. He thought of Aurora, fighting for life in her incubator. Of Vivian, who wouldn't even see him. What would cooperation look like? He asked finally. Dawn was breaking over Lake Michigan when Thatcher returned to Northwestern Memorial. He hadn't slept, hadn't changed his clothes, hadn't eaten. The FBI had released him only after he signed preliminary cooperation agreements and surrendered his passport. The NICU was quiet at this early hour. A different nurse from yesterday, her badge read Elaine, looked up as he approached. "Mr. Blackwood," she greeted him softly. "You're here early." "How is she?" he asked, moving toward Aurora's incubator. "She had a stable night," Elaine replied. "Her oxygen levels improved slightly. The doctor will do rounds in about an hour if you'd like to speak with him." Thatcher nodded, his attention fixed on his daughter. In the gentle morning light filtering through the windows, she seemed impossibly fragile yet somehow stronger than yesterday. Her skin had a healthier color, and though the ventilator remained, her vitals displayed on the nearby monitor looked more consistent. "Can I?" He hesitated, feeling like an intruder in this sterile medical world. "Of course." Elaine guided him to the chair beside the incubator. "You can put your hands through the ports, talk to her too. Babies recognize their parents' voices, even preemies." Thatcher carefully positioned his hands inside the incubator. This time he gently cradled Aurora's tiny head with one hand, while letting her grasp his finger with the other. Her entire hand couldn't even encircle his fingertip. "Hello, Aurora," he said, his voice catching. "It's your father." The words felt strange in his mouth. Father. He'd never thought much about what that truly meant beyond biology and legacy. Now, looking at this tiny being who shared his DNA but was wholly her own person, the weight of it pressed down on him. "I'm sorry I wasn't there when you arrived," he continued, unaccustomed to apologizing but finding the words came easier when speaking to her. "But I'm here now, and I'm not going anywhere." As if in response, Aurora's grip on his finger tightened slightly. The simple gesture unleashed something in Thatcher, a protective instinct so powerful it took his breath away. "Your mum is strong," he told her. "She'll be okay, and so will you. Blackwoods don't give up easily." He sat with Aurora for hours, speaking softly about nothing and everything. The view from their penthouse that she would see someday, the places he would show her, the person he hoped she would become. Not once did he mention money, or success, or power. The metrics by which he had measured his own life seemed suddenly hollow. "Mr. Blackwood," a new voice interrupted his one-sided conversation. Thatcher looked up to see Dr. Levine standing in the doorway. "I didn't mean to intrude," she said. "I've just come from checking on your wife." Thatcher carefully withdrew his hands from the incubator. "How is she?" "Stabilized. Her vitals are improving, though she's still weak." The doctor hesitated. "She's awake and alert." "Has she asked about Aurora?" "Constantly. We've been giving her updates and showing her photos." Dr. Levine studied him with clinical detachment. "She's also asked if you're still here." Hope flared in Thatcher's chest. "Does that mean she'll see me?" "Not yet." The doctor's tone was gentle but firm. "She needs time. Emotional stress could complicate her recovery." Thatcher nodded, swallowing his disappointment. "I understand. Just tell her I'm here. Tell her Aurora and I are waiting for her." 3 days passed in a strange, suspended reality. Thatcher refused to leave the hospital, sleeping in uncomfortable waiting room chairs and subsisting on cafeteria food. He wore scrubs provided by sympathetic nurses after the first day, his suit having become rumpled beyond salvation. Each morning, Special Agent Harmon called with more questions, more demands for documentation, more names of associates who might have been involved in the Carson scheme. Each afternoon, Donovan visited, bringing fresh clothes and updates on the imploding situation at Blackwood Investments. "The board is calling for your resignation," Donovan informed him on the third day, keeping his voice low in the quiet NICU waiting area. "The SEC has frozen several of your trading accounts pending investigation." "Let them have the company," Thatcher replied, surprising himself with how little he cared. "I can start over after this is resolved." Donovan studied his friend with raised eyebrows. "The FBI is building a case that could send you to prison, Thatcher. This isn't going away with a fine and a slap on the wrist." "I know." Thatcher ran a hand over the stubble on his jaw. "But Aurora is breathing on her own now. The doctors think she might leave the NICU in a week or two. That's what matters." "And Vivian?" Thatcher's expression darkened. "Still won't see me." Before Donovan could respond, a nurse approached them. "Mr. Blackwood, your wife is asking for you." Thatcher froze, certain he had misheard. "Vivian wants to see me?" The nurse nodded. "She's being moved to a private room today. She said she's ready to talk." Room 412 was awash in afternoon sunlight when Thatcher entered. Vivian sat propped up with pillows, her auburn hair pulled back in a loose ponytail, her face pale but composed. The sight of her, alive, alert, watching him with those perceptive eyes, hit Thatcher with unexpected force. "Hi," he said inadequately, stopping just inside the doorway. "You look terrible," she observed, her voice weaker than normal but with a hint of her usual directness. Despite everything, a small smile tugged at his lips. "You look beautiful." "Liar." She gestured to the chair beside her bed. "Sit down, Thatcher. You hovering there is making me nervous." He obeyed, perching awkwardly on the edge of the chair, unsure what to do with his hands. "How's Aurora?" Vivian asked. "Better every day. They removed the ventilator yesterday. She's tiny but fighting." He hesitated. "She has your determination." Vivian nodded, a flash of pain crossing her features. Whether physical or emotional, Thatcher couldn't tell. "The nurses tell me you haven't left the hospital," she said after a moment. "That you've been sleeping in waiting rooms and sitting with Aurora for hours." "Where else would I be?" Her gaze sharpened. "With Melanie Carson, perhaps?" The name hung between them like a live grenade. Thatcher didn't insult her by denying it. "How long have you known?" he asked quietly. "Does it matter?" "Months. I found receipts from the Four Seasons on your credit card statement. Then I saw the way she looked at you at the Henderson charity gala." Vivian's hands twisted the edge of her blanket. "I had myself convinced it was just physical, that it didn't threaten what we had." Thatcher felt sick with shame. While he'd been sneaking around believing himself so clever, Vivian had been silently carrying this knowledge. "It's over," he said. "It was a mistake from the beginning. Because she was using you." Vivian's tone was surprisingly even. "Donovan told me about the FBI investigation." Thatcher stared at her, stunned. "You've been talking to Donovan? Who do you think called him that day at the restaurant?" Vivian's eyes held a hint of something Thatcher had never seen there before. Calculation. "I knew where you were going when you left me." "I could see it in your face. The same look you get when you're chasing a deal." The revelation struck Thatcher like a physical blow. Vivian, his kind, trusting wife, had orchestrated Donovan's intervention. "Why didn't you confront me before?" he asked. "I was trying to save our marriage," she replied simply. "I thought when Aurora came things would change. You would change." Her voice hardened. "Then you left me during an emergency to meet her." The full weight of his betrayal crashed down on Thatcher. Not just the affair, not just the lies, but the fundamental breaking of trust when Vivian had needed him most. "I will never forgive myself for that," he said, the words inadequate, even as he spoke them. "I almost died on that operating table," Vivian continued, her voice trembling slightly. "Aurora almost died, and you weren't there." "I know." He reached for her hand, but she pulled away. "No, you don't know. You've spent your life believing the rules don't apply to you, that you're special somehow, that wealth and power can shield you from consequences." Her eyes bored into his. "But they can't shield you from this, Thatcher. You've destroyed whatever we had. Are you saying there's no chance for us?" The question left him feeling more vulnerable than he'd ever been. Vivian looked out the window at the Chicago skyline. "I'm saying, I don't recognize the man I married anymore. Maybe I never really knew him." "You know me better than anyone ever has," Thatcher admitted, "including myself." She turned back to him, her expression softening slightly. "Then you should understand why I can't just forgive and forget. Whatever happens next depends on what you do now. Not what you say, but what you actually do." A knock at the door interrupted them. Dr. Levine entered, followed by a nurse carrying a small bundle wrapped in a pink blanket. "Mrs. Blackwood," the doctor said with a smile. "Someone's been cleared for a short visit." Vivian's entire demeanor transformed, her face lighting up as the nurse carefully placed Aurora in her arms. The baby was still small, so small, but without the tubes and wires she looked more like a newborn than a medical emergency. "Oh," Vivian breathed, tears springing to her eyes. "Hello, my love." Thatcher watched, transfixed as Vivian gently unwrapped the blanket to count fingers and toes, to stroke Aurora's cheek, to press the softest of kisses to her forehead. In that moment, seeing his wife and daughter together for the first time, something crystallized in Thatcher's mind. This was what mattered, not his company, not his reputation, not the fortune he'd amassed. For the first time in his life, Thatcher Blackwood understood with perfect clarity what he needed to protect, and what he was willing to sacrifice to do so. The nurse approached him. "Would you like to hold her together? Family bonding is important." Before Thatcher could respond, his phone vibrated. A text from Agent Harmon. "Meeting tomorrow, 9 a.m. Bring documentation on all parties involved in Jefferson trade. Cooperation agreement requires full disclosure. He looked from the phone to his family, understanding exactly what full disclosure would mean. The FBI wanted names, everyone at Blackwood Investments who had knowingly benefited from his insider information, his partners, his protégés, people who had trusted him. Vivian was watching him, her eyes knowing. Another important call. Thatcher turned off the phone completely and slipped it into his pocket. "Nothing that can't wait," he said, moving to sit carefully on the edge of the bed. "May I?" With infinite gentleness, Vivian transferred Aurora into his arms. The baby squirmed slightly, then settled against his chest, her tiny hand finding its way out of the blanket to press against his heart. "What are you going to do, Thatcher?" Vivian asked softly. "About the FBI, about everything?" He met her gaze steadily. "Whatever it takes to make this right. Not for me, for both of you." As Aurora's warmth seeped through his hospital scrubs, Thatcher made his decision. Tomorrow he would give the FBI everything they wanted. Every name, every transaction, every detail, even if it meant implicating himself further. He would plead guilty to whatever charges they brought, accept whatever sentence came. It wouldn't win Vivian back. It wouldn't erase what he'd done, but it would ensure that Aurora would know someday that when the moment of truth arrived, her father had finally made the right choice. "For the record, state your name. Thatcher Alexander Blackwood. And you understand that this deposition is being recorded and may be used in federal court proceedings?" "Yes." The Justice Department conference room was sparsely furnished, just a long table, uncomfortable chairs, and recording equipment. Special Agent Harmon sat across from Thatcher, while a stern-faced assistant U.S. attorney named Wilson Jeffries took the lead on questioning. Donovan sat beside Thatcher, no longer as his attorney but as a witness to ensure the proceedings were conducted properly. "Let's begin with the Jefferson merger," Jeffries said, sliding a document across the table. "Walk us through how you obtained this information and what you did with it." Thatcher glanced at Donovan, who gave him a nearly imperceptible nod. "Melanie Carson shared confidential information with me during our personal relationship," Thatcher began, keeping his voice steady. "She mentioned that Jefferson was undervaluing their tech division by approximately 30%, and that they would be announcing a major patent approval. And who else at Blackwood Investments was aware this information came from Ms. Carson? This was the moment, the point of no return. Thatcher took a deep breath. James Harrington, Chief Investment Officer. Elizabeth Chen, Head of Strategic Acquisitions. Robert Keller, my senior partner. He continued methodically, naming 8 senior executives who had knowingly traded on the information. Jeffries raised an eyebrow. "That's essentially your entire executive team." "Yes." The single word felt like a betrayal, but Thatcher pushed forward. "I've provided documentation showing their involvement in this, and 5 other instances of trading on non-public information. You realize these individuals include your mentors, people who've worked with you for years?" "I do." "And you're prepared to testify against them if necessary?" Thatcher met Jeffries' skeptical gaze. "I'm prepared to face the consequences of my actions and tell the complete truth, regardless of who else is implicated." Later, as they left the building, Donovan broke his professional silence. "You just threw everyone under the bus," he remarked, not accusingly, but with a note of surprise. "The Thatcher Blackwood I've known for 20 years would have found a way to shield at least some of them." Thatcher watched a group of pigeons scatter as they walked toward the car. "That version of me left his wife during an emergency to meet his mistress," he said quietly. "I'm not particularly interested in being him anymore." The hospital had become Thatcher's second home over the past week. The nurses in the NICU knew him by name now, greeting him with updates on Aurora's progress as he arrived each morning. Today, however, something was wrong. The normally calm unit was a flurry of activity centered around Aurora's station. "What's happening?" he demanded, heart pounding as he spotted Dr. Kerrigan, the neonatologist, bent over his daughter. A nurse intercepted him. Aurora's oxygen levels dropped suddenly. "Dr. Kerrigan is assessing her now." "Has Vivian been told?" "She's on her way down from her room." Thatcher stood helplessly at the edge of the medical activity, watching as they reinserted a breathing tube down Aurora's tiny throat. Her skin, which had gained a healthier color in recent days, now had a bluish tinge that terrified him. "Thatcher!" Vivian's voice came from behind him. She stood in the doorway, clinging to an IV pole, clearly having left her bed against medical advice. They moved together toward Aurora's incubator, previous tensions temporarily suspended in the face of this new crisis. "What happened?" Vivian asked, her voice shaking as Dr. Kerrigan stepped back from the procedure. "Aurora has developed an infection," the doctor explained gently. "It's not uncommon in premature infants, but her immune system is still very fragile. We've started broad-spectrum antibiotics while we wait for the culture results." "Will she—" Thatcher couldn't finish the question. "The next 24 hours are critical," Dr. Kerrigan answered honestly. "But she's a fighter. I've seen smaller babies overcome worse." Vivian's legs buckled. Thatcher caught her before she could fall, guiding her to a chair beside the incubator. For the first time since the birth, she didn't pull away from his touch. "She can't die," Vivian whispered, her eyes fixed on Aurora. "Not after everything." Without thinking, Thatcher knelt beside her chair and took her hand. "She won't. She's a Blackwood, remember? And she has your strength." To his surprise, Vivian's fingers tightened around his. Not forgiveness, not reconciliation, but in this moment of shared fear, an instinctive reaching for connection. They remained there together through the long day and into the night, neither willing to leave Aurora's side. The nurses brought Vivian medications and checked her vitals, but didn't attempt to make her return to her room. Around midnight, exhausted, she dozed off in her chair. Thatcher watched his wife's face in repose, then turned back to Aurora, whose tiny chest rose and fell with the assistance of the ventilator. "You have to stay with us," he whispered to his daughter. "Your mother needs you. I need you. We're not perfect, but we both love you more than anything in this world." In the dim light of the NICU, with the rhythmic sounds of medical equipment surrounding them, Thatcher made another silent promise, not just to be a better man, but to ensure that regardless of what happened to him, Aurora and Vivian would be protected and provided for. Aurora's condition stabilized by morning, her oxygen levels slowly improving as the antibiotics began to work. Vivian, finally persuaded to return to her room for proper rest, had extracted a promise from Thatcher to call immediately if anything changed. Alone with Aurora, Thatcher checked his phone for the first time in hours. 27 missed calls, 52 text messages, and a breaking news alert that made his blood run cold. Breaking FBI raids Blackwood Investments in insider trading probe. He quickly scrolled through other notifications. Carson Financial CEO Richard Carson arrested on securities fraud, money laundering charges. Blackwood Investments founder cooperating with federal investigation sources. Blackwood turned on executive team in exchange for leniency. It had happened sooner than he expected. The FBI had moved on his information immediately, and now the story was public. His phone rang. Donovan. "It's everywhere, Thatcher," his friend said without preamble. "Every financial news outlet, CNN, Fox, all of them. The perp walks are all over Twitter." "How bad?" "Bad. Your board members are being escorted out in handcuffs. The SEC has suspended trading of Blackwood Investments stock, and—" Donovan hesitated. "What else?" "Melanie Carson held a press conference an hour ago. She's positioning herself as a whistleblower, claiming she was collecting evidence against you as part of an undercover operation." Fury rose in Thatcher's throat. "That's a lie. She was feeding me information deliberately. Her uncle is throwing you under the bus to save himself," Donovan said grimly. "They're suggesting you manipulated her to gain trading advantages." The irony was almost laughable. "Can they make that stick?" "Not with the evidence you've provided. But in the court of public opinion, it's going to get ugly." After hanging up, Thatcher stood at the window overlooking the Chicago skyline. Somewhere out there, his former colleagues were being processed into federal custody. The company he had built from nothing was imploding. His reputation, once his most valuable asset, was being systematically destroyed. Strangely, he felt a sense of relief alongside the anger and regret. The facade had crumbled completely now. There was nothing left to hide, no image left to protect. His phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "You should have kept your mouth shut. Some people don't appreciate being sacrificed. Watch your back." The threat wasn't entirely unexpected. He'd implicated powerful people with extensive connections. But for the first time in his life, Thatcher wasn't calculating odds or planning countermoves. Instead, he turned back to Aurora's incubator, to the only battle that truly mattered now. Vivian was sitting up in bed reviewing hospital discharge papers when Thatcher entered her room the following afternoon. "Aurora's fever broke," he announced, a genuine smile breaking through his exhaustion. Dr. Kerrigan says if she continues improving, she might be able to come off the ventilator again tomorrow. Thank God. Vivian closed her eyes briefly in relief. When she opened them, her gaze was sharper, more focused. I've seen the news. Thatcher nodded, taking a seat in what had become his usual chair. It's all coming down. Your entire executive team is under arrest. Yes. And you put them there. It wasn't a question, but Thatcher answered anyway. I did what I had to do. Vivian studied him with an expression he couldn't quite read. The Thatcher Blackwood I married would have found a way to protect himself first. I'm not that man anymore, he said, echoing his words to Donovan. Or at least, I'm trying not to be. Something flickered across Vivian's face. Not quite forgiveness, but perhaps its distant relative. What happens next with the case? I've accepted a plea deal. Securities fraud, obstruction of justice. The U.S. Attorney is recommending a reduced sentence in exchange for my cooperation. How reduced? 2 years minimum security, maybe less with good behavior. Vivian absorbed this without visible reaction. And what about us, our finances? The government is seizing a significant portion of my assets, but not everything. I've been working with Donovan to protect what I legally can. Thatcher leaned forward. I've established a trust for you and Aurora that should be beyond the government's reach. The penthouse is paid for and in your name. You'll be taken care of, no matter what. Taken care of, Vivian repeated, a strange note in her voice. Always the provider, even now. It's the least I can do. Vivian set aside her discharge papers. The doctors say I can go home tomorrow, but Aurora will need to stay at least another week. I'll be here with her, Thatcher said quickly. You should rest at home. That won't be necessary. Her tone was polite but firm. I've arranged for my sister to come stay with me. We'll take shifts with Aurora. The implication was clear. There was no place for Thatcher in this arrangement. Before he could respond, a nurse entered with a wheelchair. Mrs. Blackwood, time for your final NICU visit of the day. As the nurse helped Vivian into the wheelchair, Thatcher noticed something different about his wife. A new resolve in the set of her shoulders, a clarity in her eyes that hadn't been there before. She'd always been strong, but this was something else. This was a woman with a plan. Vivian, he said impulsively as she was about to leave, despite everything, I want you to know that I do love you. I always have, even when I was too blind to show it properly. She regarded him steadily. I believe you think that's true, she said finally. And I appreciate what you're trying to do now, but love isn't just a feeling, Thatcher. It's a choice you make every day through your actions. I understand that now. I hope so. Her expression softened slightly. For what it's worth, I think Aurora has helped you find something in yourself that was missing before. Hold on to that, no matter what happens with us. 3 days later, Aurora had improved enough to breathe without assistance again. Thatcher spent every possible moment at the hospital, dividing his time between Aurora's side and meetings with federal prosecutors. The media frenzy had intensified, with reporters staking out the hospital and his home. Returning to the NICU after one such meeting, Thatcher was surprised to find Vivian deep in conversation with Donovan. They fell silent as he approached. Is everything okay? He asked, looking between them. Fine, Vivian answered smoothly. Donovan was just helping me understand some legal matters regarding Aurora's trust. Donovan stood, gathering his briefcase. I should go. The prosecutors need those additional documents by tomorrow. After he left, Thatcher sat beside Vivian at Aurora's incubator. The baby was awake, her eyes, which had begun to show hints of Vivian's amber color, tracking movements with growing alertness. She's getting stronger every day, Thatcher observed. Yes. Vivian's voice was thoughtful. Donovan thinks she might be able to come home next week. That's wonderful news. Vivian turned to him, her expression softer than it had been in weeks. I've been thinking a lot about what happens after all this, about what kind of future I want for Aurora. Hope flickered in Thatcher's chest. And I think we need to try to find a way forward, for her sake. Vivian reached for his hand, a gesture so unexpected it momentarily stunned him. You're her father. Despite everything, I don't want to take that away from her. Thatcher entwined his fingers with hers, afraid to speak, lest he break whatever spell had prompted this change. I'm not saying I forgive you, Vivian continued. I'm not saying we can go back to how things were, but maybe we can build something new, something honest. I'd like that, Thatcher managed, emotion threatening to overwhelm him. More than anything. Vivian smiled, a sad, complicated smile. When you go away, I'll bring Aurora to visit. She should know her father." Thatcher raised their joined hands and pressed a kiss to her knuckles. "Thank you." As they sat together watching Aurora, Thatcher felt something like peace for the first time in recent memory. Maybe, just maybe, he hadn't destroyed everything beyond repair. What he couldn't see was the determination that flashed in Vivian's eyes when he looked away, the same expression she'd worn during her private conversation with Donovan. Nor could he hear the echo of her words from that meeting. "I need to secure everything before he's sentenced. Not just the trust and the penthouse, but everything he might have hidden. I won't let him hurt us again." Donovan had nodded gravely. "I'll help you, for Aurora's sake." Vivian's apparent forgiveness, her talk of building something new, it was part of a larger plan. A plan to ensure that when Thatcher Blackwood finally paid his debt to society, he would find that the true cost of his betrayal was far higher than he had calculated. The United States District Court for the Northern District of Illinois stood as a monument to justice, imposing limestone columns, soaring ceilings, and the weight of law pressing down from every angle. Thatcher straightened his tie as he climbed the steps beside his attorney, Marcus Webb, a distinguished criminal defense lawyer whom Donovan had recommended. "Remember, stick to the agreement," Webb murmured as they navigated through the media gauntlet. "Your cooperation has been noted favorably by the prosecution, but Judge Hoffman is known for his harsh stance on white-collar crime." Thatcher nodded, his eyes scanning the crowd. Donovan stood near the entrance, waiting. Behind him, to Thatcher's surprise, was Vivian, looking composed in a conservative navy dress, her auburn hair pulled back in a simple knot. "I didn't expect you to come," Thatcher said when they reached her. "Aurora's nurse agreed to stay with her at home," Vivian replied, her expression giving nothing away. "This affects her future too." The three of them entered the courtroom together, an unlikely unit bound by circumstances none could have predicted. The gallery was packed. Financial reporters, former colleagues, curious spectators drawn to the spectacular fall of one of Chicago's most prominent businessmen. Melanie Carson sat in the front row behind the prosecution table, her posture perfect, her expression somber. When she caught Thatcher's eye, she didn't look away, just held his gaze with cold calculation. "All rise." The Honorable Judge William Hoffman presiding. The proceedings began with the formal reading of charges. Thatcher had already pleaded guilty to 2 counts of securities fraud and 1 count of obstruction of justice as part of his plea agreement. Today was about victim impact statements, character witnesses, and ultimately sentencing. Assistant U.S. Attorney Jeffries presented the government's case efficiently, outlining the scope of the fraud and acknowledging Thatcher's cooperation while emphasizing the seriousness of the crimes. The defendant's actions undermined market integrity and caused substantial financial harm, Jeffries concluded. While his cooperation has been significant and is reflected in our sentencing recommendation, there must be meaningful consequences. Judge Hoffman nodded, then turned to Webb. "Does the defense wish to present character witnesses?" Webb stood. "Yes, Your Honor. The defense calls Vivian Blackwood." A murmur rippled through the courtroom. Thatcher turned to Vivian, confusion evident in his expression. They hadn't discussed her testifying. As Vivian was sworn in, Thatcher leaned toward Webb. "What is this?" he whispered. "Her idea," Webb murmured back. "Donovan arranged it, said it might help." Vivian took the stand, her composure absolute as she faced the crowded courtroom. When she spoke, her voice was clear and steady. "Mrs. Blackwood," Webb began, "could you tell the court about your husband? Not the businessman, but the man you know." Vivian folded her hands in her lap. "Thatcher has always been driven by a need to succeed, to prove himself. That drive created the financial security we enjoy, but it also created blind spots in his character." Webb frowned slightly, this not being the glowing character reference he'd expected. "And since these events came to light, since Aurora's birth," Vivian continued, "I've seen genuine change. For the first time in our marriage, Thatcher has put someone else's needs before his own ambitions. He has shown remorse not just for being caught, but for the actual harm his actions caused." Thatcher watched her, trying to read between the lines of her careful testimony. "Do you believe he deserves leniency, Mrs. Blackwood?" Webb asked. Vivian's gaze shifted to Thatcher. "I believe every person deserves the opportunity for redemption, but I also believe that true redemption requires facing consequences." Webb, sensing this wasn't going in the direction he'd hoped, quickly concluded his questioning. Attorney Jeffries declined to cross-examine, a decision that struck Thatcher as odd. As Vivian returned to her seat, Thatcher realized what had happened. Her testimony had appeared supportive on the surface, but she had subtly reinforced the prosecution's argument that despite his cooperation, he needed to face serious consequences. It was masterfully done. The court moved on to victim impact statements, including one from a pension fund that had lost millions due to manipulated trades. Throughout it all, Thatcher sat quietly, the full magnitude of his actions sinking in more deeply with each speaker. Finally, Judge Hoffman addressed him directly. "Mr. Blackwood, you have the right to make a statement before sentencing." Thatcher rose slowly, feeling the weight of every eye in the courtroom. "Your Honor, I stand before you having pleaded guilty because I am guilty, not just of the specific charges, but of a pattern of behavior that prioritized wealth and power over integrity." He paused, gathering his thoughts. "I've lost the right to ask for leniency, but I would ask the court to consider that my actions going forward will focus on making amends to my family, to those harmed by my actions, and to society." Judge Hoffman regarded him impassively. "Mr. Blackwood, this court has seen many defendants express remorse at sentencing. The true test is what happens after today." "I understand, Your Honor. Based on the defendant's guilty plea, substantial cooperation with authorities, and the government's recommendation," Judge Hoffman continued, "this court sentences you to 30 months in federal prison, followed by 3 years of supervised release. You are further ordered to pay restitution of $27 million to the identified victims." The gavel fell with finality. 30 months, 6 more than the prosecution had recommended. Thatcher felt a curious sense of relief. The uncertainty was over. The path forward, however difficult, was now clear. As the courtroom began to empty, Melanie Carson approached, ignoring the warning look from Thatcher's attorney. "You should have kept your mouth shut," she said quietly. "Uncle Richard won't forget what you did." "Was any of it real?" Thatcher asked, surprising himself with the question. "Or was I just a mark from the beginning?" Something flickered across Melanie's perfect features, not quite regret, but perhaps a moment of honesty. "The sex was real. The rest," she shrugged. "Business is business, Thatcher. You taught me that." Before he could respond, she turned and walked away, her heels clicking on the marble floor, leaving him to face the bitter truth that she had only been following the playbook he himself had written throughout his career. Outside the courthouse, away from the media scrum, Donovan waited with Vivian beside a black SUV with tinted windows. 30 months, Thatcher said as he approached them. "Longer than we expected." "Judge Hoffman is sending a message," Donovan replied. "Still, with good behavior, you could be out in less than 2 years." Thatcher nodded, then turned to Vivian. "Your testimony was not what I expected." "I told the truth," she said simply. "That's what witnesses are supposed to do." "You didn't have to be there at all." "Yes, I did." Vivian's amber eyes met his directly. "I needed to see this through to the end." Something in her tone made Thatcher look more closely at her, then at Donovan, noting the subtle exchange of glances between them. "What's going on?" he asked. "There's something you're not telling me." Donovan sighed. "We should talk privately." He gestured to the SUV. "Let's go somewhere quieter." The lakefront park was nearly deserted on this cold autumn afternoon. Thatcher walked between Vivian and Donovan, the wind off Lake Michigan cutting through his suit jacket. "I've been helping Vivian secure your assets," Donovan said finally, breaking the silence. "Everything that wasn't subject to forfeiture has been transferred to trusts for Aurora and for Vivian's financial independence." Thatcher frowned. "I know that. I authorized those transfers." "Not all of them," Vivian said quietly. "What does that mean?" Donovan stopped walking, turning to face his old friend. "It means I've been working both sides of this situation, Thatcher. As your oldest friend, I wanted to protect you from the worst consequences of your actions. But as someone who cares deeply for Vivian and Aurora, I also needed to ensure they were protected from any future lapses in judgment on your part." Understanding began to dawn. "What exactly have you done?" "I found your offshore accounts," Vivian answered. "The ones even the FBI doesn't know about. Donovan helped me access them and transfer the funds to a new trust that only I control." Thatcher stared at her, stunned. "How did you even know?" "You mentioned Cayman account numbers in your sleep once," she said, a hint of bitter amusement in her voice. "After a particularly late night with Melanie, I suspect. I wrote them down and kept them just in case. The revelation struck Thatcher dumb. Vivian, his gentle, trusting wife, had been playing a long game he hadn't even realized was happening. There's more, Donovan added. Your minority stakes in several venture capital funds, the property in Aspen under your mother's maiden name, the art collection held by the Shell Corporation in Luxembourg, all of it has been restructured. You've been planning this for months, Thatcher said to Vivian, realization dawning. Since before Aurora was born. She nodded. After I discovered your affair, I knew I needed protection, financial independence that couldn't be compromised by your actions. When the FBI investigation began, it became even more urgent. Why not just divorce me and take half? Because half might not have been enough given the government seizures. This way, Aurora's future is secure regardless of what penalties you face. Vivian's expression softened slightly. And because, despite everything, I wanted to give you a chance to be a father to her. Thatcher looked out over the lake, processing the magnitude of what they'd done. These were accounts and assets he'd specifically hidden, his ultimate safety net, his secret insurance policy, and they'd found all of it. I thought I was so clever, he said finally. The master strategist, always 3 moves ahead. You were outplayed, Donovan said, not unkindly, by the 2 people who know you best. They resumed walking, the path curving alongside the water's edge. After a long silence, Thatcher asked, So what happens now? You report to Duluth Federal Prison Camp next month, Donovan answered. I've arranged for you to be as comfortable as possible, within the constraints of the system. And us? Thatcher looked at Vivian. I'll bring Aurora to visit, she said. As I promised. She deserves to know her father. Even after all this? Even after what you've done? Vivian stopped, turning to face him fully. What I've done was protect our daughter from the consequences of your choices, but it doesn't erase the fact that you're her father, or that you've shown genuine love for her. And for you? Thatcher asked quietly. That's more complicated. Vivian's expression was a complex mixture of emotions, anger, residual affection, resignation. I don't know if I can ever trust you completely again. But I do believe people can change, Thatcher. Even you. They reached the SUV where the driver waited to take them back to different versions of their lives. Vivian to the penthouse with Aurora, Thatcher to the empty hotel room where he would spend his remaining weeks of freedom. Before they parted, Donovan pulled Thatcher aside. There's one more thing you should know, he said quietly. The additional 6 months in your sentence, that wasn't just Judge Hoffman being harsh. What do you mean? Vivian spoke privately with Attorney Jeffries before the hearing. She suggested that a slightly longer sentence would be more likely to drive home the lessons you needed to learn. Thatcher stared at his friend, then at his wife as she climbed into the vehicle. She asked for a harsher sentence? She asked for what she thought would actually help you become the man Aurora needs as a father, Donovan corrected. Someone who understands that actions have consequences, that shortcuts and manipulation eventually fail. As the realization sank in, Thatcher felt something unexpected. Not anger, but a strange sort of respect. Vivian had outmaneuvered him at every turn, not out of vengeance but with strategic precision, aimed at securing their daughter's future, and, perhaps, at forcing him to become someone better. She's remarkable, he said softly. She always was, Donovan agreed. And you just didn't see it clearly until now. 1 week before Thatcher was due to report to prison, he sat in the nursery of the penthouse, rocking Aurora gently as she slept in his arms. Vivian stood in the doorway, watching silently. I found the paperwork, Thatcher said without looking up, for the Children's Hospital Wing donation in Aurora's name, using my hidden funds. It seemed fitting, Vivian replied, a good use for money that came from questionable sources. Thatcher nodded, still gazing at his sleeping daughter. Once I would have been furious that you outsmarted me, took control of my assets, manipulated my sentence. Now I just find myself impressed, and sad that it took all this for me to truly see you. Vivian entered the room, sitting in the second rocking chair across from him. I wasn't always this way. You taught me to be strategic, to think several moves ahead. I was paying attention all those years, even when you thought I wasn't. I've lost everything, Thatcher said quietly. My company, my reputation, my freedom, my hidden wealth. Not everything, Vivian corrected, her gaze shifting to Aurora. You've gained something more valuable, if you're wise enough to recognize it. As if sensing she was the topic of conversation, Aurora's eyes fluttered open, amber like her mother's, but with an intensity that reminded Thatcher of himself. She regarded him solemnly, her tiny hand reaching up to touch his face. In that moment, facing the ruins of the empire he had built and the consequences of his choices, Thatcher Blackwood understood with perfect clarity what Vivian meant. He had lost the things he once valued above all else, but had gained a chance at something he never knew he needed: redemption, purpose, and a love uncomplicated by manipulation or strategy. "I see it," he whispered, both to Vivian and to Aurora. "I see it now." The federal prison camp at Duluth bore little resemblance to the imposing maximum security facilities depicted in films. Located on the former Duluth Air Force Base, it housed non-violent offenders in dormitory-style quarters with relatively relaxed security. Still, as Thatcher surrendered his personal belongings, his watch, wallet, belt, the platinum cufflinks Vivian had given him on their first anniversary, the reality of his situation crystallized in ways the sentencing hearing had not. "Blackwood," the intake officer called, barely glancing up from his clipboard. "Standard issue uniform, toiletries, bedding. Follow Officer Reynolds to your housing unit." Gone was Mr. Blackwood, the deferential tone, the special treatment his wealth had always secured. Here he was just another inmate, prisoner Thamorba 47291-424. His assigned housing unit contained 8 men in 4 bunk beds. His cubicle consisted of the bottom bunk and a small locker. His bunkmate, a former real estate developer named Garrett, who had been convicted of mortgage fraud, hardly looked up when Thatcher arrived. "Top shelf in the locker is yours," Garrett said without introduction. "Breakfast is at 6 a.m. They do counts 5 times a day. Don't be late or everyone suffers." That first night, lying on a thin mattress staring at the underside of Garrett's bunk, Thatcher catalogued everything he had lost. His penthouse with its panoramic view of Chicago, his custom suits, his executive assistant anticipating his needs, his ability to make a single phone call and set millions of dollars in motion. Even the smallest comforts, quality coffee, privacy, silence when he wanted it, were now beyond his reach. But strangest of all was the loss of control. For the first time since childhood, his day was structured entirely by others. When to wake, eat, work, sleep. Decisions that had once been his alone were now made by rules and individuals indifferent to his former status. His assigned job in the prison library paid 23 cents an hour, less than he had previously spent per second on his lifestyle. The irony wasn't lost on him, as he carefully shelved worn paperbacks and helped other inmates fill out request forms for legal materials. In his 3rd week, Donovan visited, bringing updates on the outside world. Richard Carson got 20 years, he reported, sitting across from Thatcher in the visiting room. Melanie took a plea deal for 5 years in exchange for testimony against her uncle and others. "And my former executive team?" Thatcher asked. "Sentences ranging from 4 to 10 years, depending on their level of involvement. The SEC is still unwinding the full extent of the trading violations." Donovan studied his friend's face. "You look different." Thatcher ran a hand over his now closely cropped hair, a practical adaptation to prison life. "Getting back to basics." "It's more than that," Donovan observed. "You seem, I don't know, clearer somehow." "Clarity comes easier when you have nothing left to hide," Thatcher replied. "How are Vivian and Aurora?" "Thriving. Aurora is growing quickly, meeting all her developmental milestones despite the premature birth. Vivian has started consulting for the Children's Hospital Foundation, using her nursing background and your financial connections. The Aurora Blackwood NICU wing is scheduled to open next spring." Something warm unfurled in Thatcher's chest at the news. "She's using the money well." "Better than you would have," Donovan agreed with a faint smile. "She's establishing a pattern of philanthropic giving that's rehabilitating the Blackwood name, for Aurora's sake, she says. And for her own satisfaction," Thatcher added, not bitterly. "The ultimate victory, transforming the fruits of my misdeeds into something genuinely good." "Does that bother you?" Thatcher considered the question. 6 months ago, it would have infuriated me. Someone else controlling my resources, making decisions without my input. Now, he glanced around the visiting room at other inmates with their families. "Now, I just hope they'll visit soon." 3 months into his sentence, they finally came. Thatcher was shelving books in the library when an officer approached. "Blackwood, you have visitors." The visiting room was crowded with weekend guests. Thatcher scanned the tables until he spotted them, Vivian, elegant even in simple jeans and a sweater, holding Aurora in her arms. At 9 months old, his daughter had changed dramatically, chubbier, more alert, with a full head of auburn hair like her mother's. "Hi," Thatcher said inadequately as he approached their table. "Hello, Thatcher." Vivian's tone was neither warm nor cold, just measured. "Someone wanted to meet you properly." She turned Aurora to face him. The baby regarded him with solemn amber eyes, then broke into an unexpected smile that transformed her face. "She's beautiful," Thatcher whispered, instinctively reaching out before remembering the prison rules. Brief hugs at beginning and end of visits only, limited physical contact otherwise. Sensing his hesitation, Vivian stood. "You're allowed to hold her. I checked the regulations." The weight of Aurora in his arms struck Thatcher with unexpected emotion. He had held her in the NICU and during his final weeks before reporting to prison, but this was different. She was solid now, vibrant with life, studying his face with obvious curiosity. "Hello, Aurora," he said softly. "I'm your father." To his surprise, she reached up and patted his cheek with her tiny hand, a gesture so innocent and accepting that he had to blink back sudden tears. "She's very tactile," Vivian explained, watching them carefully. "Loves to touch faces." They sat together, the strange little family unit they had become. Vivian shared updates on Aurora's development, her first tooth, her attempts at crawling, her fascination with the classical music Vivian played in the penthouse. "How are you?" Thatcher asked when there was a lull in the baby stories. Vivian considered the question, her expression thoughtful. "I'm finding my way. The foundation work is fulfilling. I've reconnected with friends from my nursing days. Aurora keeps me busy. And the rest? The financial matters? Everything is secure," she assured him. "The government seized what they were entitled to, but the trusts remain intact. Aurora's future is protected. And yours?" A small smile played at the corner of her mouth. "Mine as well. Your offshore portfolio has performed remarkably well under my management. It turns out I have a knack for investment strategy." The revelation surprised a laugh out of Thatcher. "You've been playing the markets with my hidden funds." "With the help of advisors," Vivian admitted. "But yes, it seemed wasteful not to make the money work for us." Thatcher shook his head in amazement. "You continue to surprise me." "Good." Her eyes met his directly. "I spent too many years being predictable, being the safe harbor you could always return to after your adventures. That version of me is gone." Aurora began to fuss, and Vivian took her back, soothing her with practiced ease. Watching them together, Thatcher felt a complex mixture of pride, regret, and something like hope. "How long will you stay in Chicago?" he asked. "You could go anywhere now. Start fresh." "Chicago is home," Vivian replied simply, "and despite everything, I want Aurora to know where she comes from, both sides of her heritage, the good and the bad." When the visit ended, Thatcher was permitted a brief hug. Aurora clung to his neck for a moment, and he breathed in the baby-sweet scent of her hair, storing the memory for the lonely days ahead. "We'll come again next month," Vivian promised as they parted. "I meant what I said about Aurora knowing her father." Watching them leave, Thatcher felt the familiar prison walls closing in around him again, but something had changed. The visit had anchored him to the world outside in a way his former wealth and power never had. The first year of Thatcher's sentence established a pattern. Vivian brought Aurora for monthly visits, documenting her growth and development through photographs and stories. As Aurora began to speak, she recognized Thatcher immediately at each visit, running to him with cries of "Dada!" that both filled his heart and broke it simultaneously. Donovan visited regularly as well, bringing legal updates and handling the remaining loose ends of Thatcher's former life. The news from the outside world continued to evolve. Melanie Carson's testimony had led to additional arrests at other financial institutions. Former Blackwood Investments clients had filed civil suits that would take years to resolve. Financial regulations had tightened in response to the scandal. Meanwhile, Thatcher found unexpected purpose in prison. He began tutoring fellow inmates working toward their GEDs, finding satisfaction in helping others navigate complex texts and mathematical concepts. He joined a meditation group led by a former tech executive serving time for tax evasion. Most surprisingly, he started writing, reflective essays at first, then what gradually evolved into a memoir exploring the psychology of white-collar crime from the inside. "I should publish it when you get out," suggested his writing group facilitator, a former journalist imprisoned for refusing to reveal sources in a national security case. "People are fascinated by falls from grace, especially when there's genuine insight." "I'm not looking for more attention," Thatcher replied, "or to profit from my mistakes." "Then publish anonymously, donate the proceeds. But your perspective is unique. You've seen both sides now." During Vivian's visit the following week, Thatcher mentioned the writing project. "I've been thinking about what happens when I get out," he said, as they watched Aurora play with a puzzle the prison had approved for visiting children, "about how to make something meaningful from this experience." Vivian studied him, her amber eyes thoughtful. "You've changed. Prison changes everyone." "No," she shook her head. "Many people just become bitter or more entrenched in their patterns." "You're actually reflecting, growing." "I've had time to think," Thatcher said simply, "about who I was, who I want to be for Aurora, for myself." "And who is that?" Thatcher watched his daughter, now approaching her second birthday, methodically fitting puzzle pieces together with intense concentration. "Someone who values connection over acquisition, truth over advantage, who understands that real worth isn't measured by account balances." Vivian's expression softened. "That sounds like someone Aurora could be proud to know." "What about you?" he asked carefully. "Could you ever—" "I don't know, Thatcher," she answered honestly. "Some bridges, once burned, can't be fully rebuilt. But I'm not closing any doors completely." It was more than he deserved, and he knew it. 18 months into his sentence, Thatcher received unexpected news during Donovan's regular visit. "The federal prosecutor is recommending early release," Donovan explained, pushing legal papers across the visiting table. "Your cooperation led to additional convictions, and your record here has been exemplary. With good behavior credits, you could be out in 3 months." Thatcher stared at the documents, emotions warring within him. "Does Vivian know?" "Not yet. I wanted to tell you first." "What would this mean?" "House arrest, halfway house. 3 months in a halfway house, then supervised release with regular check-ins with a probation officer. You could start rebuilding your life." Thatcher leaned back, processing the news. "What life, exactly? I can't work in finance again. My reputation is destroyed. Most of my assets are either seized or controlled by Vivian." "You could start fresh," Donovan suggested. "Use your skills in a different arena. Maybe consulting or teaching. Your memoir could open doors." Thatcher fingered the edge of the paperwork. "I need to think about this. Talk to Vivian." When she visited the following weekend, Thatcher shared the news after Aurora had fallen asleep in Vivian's lap, exhausted from their play session. "How do you feel about it?" Vivian asked, her expression carefully neutral. "Conflicted," he admitted. "Part of me wants to get back to the world, to be present for Aurora as she grows. But another part is afraid," she finished for him. "Yes." The admission came easier than it once would have. "Afraid of failing again, of disappointing you both." Vivian adjusted Aurora's position, considering her response. "When you were sentenced, I thought 30 months was what you needed. Time to truly reflect and change. But watching you these past 18 months, maybe you've already done that work. And practically speaking, what would this mean for us?" "You'd need somewhere to live after the halfway house," Vivian said pragmatically. "I've maintained the lake house in Michigan. It's modest by your former standards, but comfortable. Close enough that Aurora and I could visit regularly." Thatcher was touched by her foresight. "You've been planning for this." "I try to anticipate all possibilities," she said, with a hint of the strategic thinking that had so thoroughly outmaneuvered him 2 years ago. "It's a skill I've developed. Learned from the master," he said with a rueful smile, "and now far exceeding the teacher." 3 months later, on a crisp autumn morning, Thatcher Blackwood walked out of the federal prison camp at Duluth a free man, or at least a man on supervised release. Donovan waited in the parking lot, leaning against his car. "Welcome back to the world," he said, embracing his friend. Thatcher breathed deeply, savoring air that wasn't contained by fences and regulations. "It doesn't feel real yet." "It will." Donovan opened the passenger door, ready for the next chapter. The halfway house in Chicago was a converted motel on the city's west side, a stark contrast to the luxury Thatcher had once taken for granted. His room contained a narrow bed, a small desk, and a shared bathroom. The house rules were strict: curfew, mandatory job search, weekly drug testing, no alcohol. But it also offered something prison had not: the freedom to venture into the city during daylight hours. to begin reconnecting with the world on new terms. His first approved outing was to meet Vivian and Aurora at Millennium Park. As he approached the Crown Fountain, Thatcher spotted them immediately. Aurora running through the water jets, squealing with delight as Vivian watched nearby. At 2.5, Aurora was a whirlwind of energy and personality. Her auburn curls bounced as she ran, her face alight with the simple joy of water on a warm day. When she spotted him, she froze momentarily, then ran full speed in his direction. "Daddy, you're not in the special house anymore." Thatcher knelt to catch her, lifting her into an embrace that felt like coming home. "That's right, sweetheart. I'm not in the special house anymore." Over Aurora's shoulder, his eyes met Vivian's. She approached slowly, her expression a complex mixture of emotions. "You look well," she said, taking in his appearance. Healthy from prison routine and physical labor, dressed in simple clothes Donovan had provided. "You look beautiful," he replied honestly. They sat on a bench watching Aurora play, maintaining a careful distance between them, physical and emotional. "I've been thinking about your early release," Vivian said after a while, "about what it means for all of us. And I think we need to establish clear boundaries and expectations." She turned to face him directly. "I've built a good life for Aurora and myself. I'm proud of what I've accomplished with the resources I secured." "As you should be," Thatcher acknowledged. "The Children's Hospital wing is opening next month. I've established a foundation in Aurora's name that's making real differences in pediatric care. I've grown the investment substantially." She hesitated. "What I'm saying is, I don't need you to fix anything or provide anything. We're secure." "I understand. But," Vivian continued, her voice softening slightly, "Aurora does need her father. Not the man you were, but the man you're becoming. And that man is welcome in our lives, carefully, gradually." Thatcher watched Aurora splashing with another child, her laughter carrying across the park. "What about us, Vivian? Is there any chance—" "I don't know," she interrupted gently. "So there's too much history, too much hurt, but I'm not ruling anything out completely. For now, let's focus on co-parenting successfully, on rebuilding trust one day at a time." It wasn't the reunion he might have once fantasized about, but it was honest, and honesty, Thatcher had learned, was worth more than comfortable illusions. 6 months after his release, Thatcher's memoir was published anonymously, with all proceeds dedicated to the Aurora Blackwood Foundation. The book, Calculated Risk: Confessions of a Financial Predator, became an unexpected bestseller, praised for its unflinching examination of the psychology behind white-collar crime. He had settled into the Michigan Lake House, commuting to Chicago for his work as a consultant for a non-profit focused on financial literacy for underserved communities. The position paid a fraction of his former salary, but offered something his previous career never had, the knowledge that his expertise was helping rather than exploiting others. His relationship with Aurora blossomed as he became a regular presence in her life, weekend visits, bedtime stories over video calls, little traditions that were theirs alone. With Vivian, progress came more slowly, tentative conversations that gradually expanded beyond co-parenting logistics, occasional family dinners that ended with comfortable silences rather than painful ones. On a snowy evening in December, nearly 3 years after Aurora's birth, Thatcher sat on the porch of the lake house with Vivian, watching the sunset over the frozen expanse of Lake Michigan. They had just finished a day of winter activities with Aurora, who was now napping inside, exhausted from her first attempt at ice skating. "I never thanked you," Thatcher said unexpectedly. Vivian turned to him, curious. "For what?" "For taking everything." He smiled at her surprise. "It's true. By securing those assets, by outmaneuvering me, you forced me to confront who I really was. Someone who measured his worth entirely by what he owned and controlled." "That wasn't my intention," Vivian admitted. "I was just protecting Aurora and myself." "I know, but the result was the same. You took everything I thought mattered, and in doing so, showed me what actually did." He gestured toward the house where Aurora slept. This real connection. Vivian was quiet for a long moment. "We've both lost and gained in different ways," she said finally. "I lost the husband I thought I had, the perfect life I pretended we shared. But I gained independence, strength, purpose. And I lost an empire but found something worth building instead, a genuine relationship with my daughter. Maybe someday, a new understanding with you." The silence between them was comfortable now, a shared acknowledgement of their complex journey. Donovan says Melanie Carson is being released to a halfway house next month, Vivian said eventually. Thatcher nodded. Her testimony helped dismantle 3 other fraudulent operations. Reduced her sentence significantly. Does that bother you? That she'll serve less time than you did? No, Thatcher replied honestly. What she took from me, my freedom, my reputation, my wealth, led me to find things of greater value. In a strange way, I should thank her too. Vivian studied him thoughtfully. You really have changed. People can, he said simply, when they have proper motivation. As the last light faded from the sky, Aurora's voice called from inside the house, awake from her nap and demanding attention. They both rose automatically, this shared response to their daughter's needs, now a comfortable routine. At the door, Vivian paused, turning to face Thatcher fully. I can't promise what the future holds for us, she said carefully, but I'm open to discovering it together, one day at a time. It wasn't forgiveness, not completely. It wasn't reconciliation, not yet. But as they walked inside to their waiting daughter, Thatcher recognized it for what it was, a beginning, built on truth rather than illusion, a chance to create something authentic from the ashes of what they had lost. In the warm light of the lake house, with Aurora chattering excitedly about her ice skating adventure, Thatcher felt the final pieces of his transformation clicking into place. He had lost an empire of wealth and influence, but gained a kingdom of far greater value, one measured not in dollars but in genuine human connection, hard-won wisdom, and the precious opportunity to become someone worthy of his daughter's love, and perhaps someday worthy of Vivian's trust once more. The graduation ceremony at Chicago Children's Academy was held in the school's sunlit auditorium, packed with proud parents clutching bouquets and cameras. From his seat in the 3rd row, Thatcher Blackwood watched as 7-year-old Aurora, resplendent in a navy blue cap and gown sized for elementary school completion, lined up with her classmates for their procession. She's not nervous at all, Vivian whispered beside him, her shoulder barely touching his. Look at that confidence. Indeed, while other children fidgeted and glanced anxiously at the audience, Aurora stood tall, her auburn curls neatly contained under her cap, her amber eyes bright with anticipation. When she spotted her parents, she gave a subtle wave, poised, controlled, yet unmistakably excited. Wonder where she gets that from, Thatcher replied with a small smile. The years since his release had transformed both their lives in ways neither could have predicted. Thatcher now ran a successful consulting practice, specializing in corporate ethics and financial literacy. Irony not lost on anyone familiar with his history. His anonymous memoir had spawned a series of university lectures and workshops for business students on the slippery slope of ethical compromises. Vivian had transformed the Aurora Blackwood Foundation into one of Chicago's most respected philanthropic organizations, focusing on pediatric healthcare accessibility. Recently appointed to the board of Northwestern Memorial Hospital, she had become a powerful advocate for family-centered medical care. Her nursing background, combined with her now considerable financial acumen, creating a uniquely effective voice. Their relationship had evolved into something neither of them had terminology for. Not quite reconciled, not merely co-parents, but partners in a carefully negotiated peace that prioritized Aurora above all else. Thatcher maintained his residence at the Michigan Lake House, while Vivian and Aurora remained in the Chicago penthouse. They shared holidays, coordinated schedules, and occasionally, very occasionally, allowed themselves moments of connection that hinted at what might have been or what might still be. As pomp and circumstance began playing through the auditorium speakers, Aurora and her classmates marched in with practiced precision. Watching his daughter's confident stride, Thatcher felt the familiar mixture of pride and melancholy that had become his emotional baseline these past years. Pride in the remarkable person she was becoming, melancholy for the early years he'd nearly missed through his own arrogance and poor choices. The ceremony itself was predictably adorable. Children receiving certificates with exaggerated formality, proud teachers highlighting class achievements, parents discreetly wiping away sentimental tears. When Aurora's name was called, both Thatcher and Vivian stood, applauding as she crossed the small stage with perfect poise to accept her certificate. Afterward, in the reception area decorated with colorful streamers and congratulatory banners, Aurora ran to them through the crowd, certificate clutched carefully in her small hand. "Did you see me? I didn't trip or anything," she exclaimed, bouncing on her toes. "You were perfect, sweetheart," Vivian assured her, adjusting her cap that had tilted during her excited dash. "Very dignified," Thatcher agreed, kneeling to her level. "Exactly what I'd expect from a future valedictorian." Aurora beamed, then grew suddenly serious, that quick shift to gravity that always reminded Thatcher of himself before his downfall. "Ms. Patterson wants to talk to you both about next year's advanced program." As Aurora pulled them toward her teacher, Thatcher caught Vivian's eye over their daughter's head, a moment of shared amusement at Aurora's academic ambitions, so evident even at 7. Later that evening, after Aurora's celebration dinner at her favorite restaurant and her eventual surrender to exhaustion, Thatcher and Vivian sat on the penthouse terrace overlooking the Chicago skyline. The city lights reflected on Lake Michigan, creating the illusion of stars both above and below. "She wants to be a doctor and a financial analyst," Vivian said, smiling over her glass of wine. "Apparently she plans to heal people and manage their investments simultaneously." "Ambitious," Thatcher nodded. "But if anyone could do it." "She gets that from you," Vivian acknowledged. "The drive, the strategic thinking. I just hope she also learned from my mistakes," Thatcher finished when she hesitated. "It's okay to say it, Vivian. We've agreed to be honest with her about my past when she's ready to understand it." They sat in comfortable silence, the years having smoothed the jagged edges of their history into something they could navigate without drawing blood. Thatcher studied Vivian's profile against the night sky, the same beautiful features he had once taken for granted, now marked with subtle lines of experience and authority. "The Foundation's annual gala is next month," Vivian said, changing subjects. "The board wanted me to ask if you'd consider speaking this year. Your perspective on ethical business practices would align well with our transparency initiatives." Thatcher raised an eyebrow. "Wouldn't that be awkward? Please welcome convicted felon Thatcher Blackwood to discuss ethics." "Former convicted felon," Vivian corrected. "And that's precisely what makes your perspective valuable. You've seen both sides." He considered it, watching the lake breeze ruffle Vivian's hair. "If you think it would help the Foundation, I'll do it. Thank you." She hesitated, then added, "It would mean a lot to Aurora, too. She's proud of the work you do now." The simple statement affected Thatcher more deeply than he could express. Aurora's awareness of his past was still developing. Age-appropriate explanations about Daddy's mistake and making better choices had laid groundwork for the full truth she would eventually learn. That she could feel pride in his current path was a gift he had never expected. "Do you ever wonder," he asked after a moment, "what would have happened if I hadn't been caught? If Melanie hadn't been an informant, if the FBI hadn't investigated?" Vivian turned to face him fully. "Sometimes. I imagine you would have continued down that path, making increasingly questionable choices, justifying each one. I would have remained willfully blind to protect our marriage, and Aurora would have grown up with a very different father." "A worse one," Thatcher acknowledged. "A less authentic one," Vivian countered. "You were never evil, Thatcher, just compromised. By your own definitions of success, by the world you operated in." He nodded, accepting her assessment. "And you? Do you regret any of it? Taking control of the assets, arranging for a harsher sentence?" A small smile played at the corner of Vivian's mouth. "I regret that it was necessary, but not that I did it. You saved me from myself," Thatcher said quietly, "and protected Aurora in the process. I've never properly thanked you for that. You don't need to thank me. Just continue being the father she deserves." As the night deepened around them, conversation drifted to practical matters. Aurora's summer schedule, upcoming Foundation events, maintenance needed at the lake house, the business of their carefully structured lives, designed to provide Aurora with stability while accommodating the complex history between her parents. Finally, as midnight approached, Thatcher stood to leave. "I should head back to the hotel. Early train tomorrow." Vivian walked him to the door, their footsteps quiet in the dimly lit penthouse. At the threshold, they paused in that moment of uncertain protocol that still occasionally surfaced, despite years of co-parenting. "Thatcher," Vivian said suddenly, her voice soft, "do you remember what you said to me during your sentencing? About becoming someone Aurora could be proud of?" "Of course. You've done that," she said simply. "Whatever else has happened between us, whatever else remains unresolved, I want you to know that. Something tightened in Thatcher's chest, not pain exactly, but the bittersweet recognition of a journey that had cost him nearly everything, yet given him something invaluable in return. That means more than you know, he managed. Impulsively, Vivian reached out and straightened his tie, a gesture from their married life that she hadn't performed in years. Her fingers lingered briefly on the fabric before she stepped back. "Good night, Thatcher." "Good night, Vivian." The following morning, before departing for Michigan, Thatcher stopped by to say goodbye to Aurora. She was in the penthouse's small home office, already working on a summer project despite having graduated only yesterday. "What's this?" he asked, peering over her shoulder at a carefully drawn chart. "It's for my presentation on financial responsibility," she explained seriously. "For kids at the community center. Mom says it's important to teach people about money when they're young." Thatcher studied the colorful diagram, recognizing Vivian's influence in its focus on saving and charitable giving, yet seeing his own strategic approach in the allocation categories Aurora had created. "This is excellent work," he said. "Very comprehensive." Aurora beamed at the praise, then grew thoughtful. "Dad, can I ask you something important?" "Of course, anything." She twisted a curl around her finger, a gesture so reminiscent of Vivian that it made his heart ache. "When I grow up, how do I make sure I use money the right way? Not the way that caused your big mistake?" The question, delivered with a child's directness yet containing profound complexity, momentarily robbed Thatcher of words. He sat in the chair beside her, gathering his thoughts. "That's an excellent question," he said finally. "And the simple answer is, by remembering that money is just a tool, not a measure of who you are." She considered this with the seriousness only a 7-year-old could bring to philosophical matters. Like a hammer. Exactly like a hammer. You can use it to build something wonderful, or you can use it to break things. The choice is always yours. He looked into her amber eyes, Vivian's eyes, watching him with complete trust. "My mistake was thinking that having the biggest hammer made me the most important person. It doesn't." Aurora nodded, processing this wisdom. "I think I understand. You know what matters most of all?" Thatcher asked, gently tucking a stray curl behind her ear. "What? People, relationships, being honest with those you love even when it's difficult?" He smiled at her. "Your mother taught me that, though it took me a long time to learn." Aurora smiled back, then wrapped her arms around his neck in a fierce hug. "I'm glad you learned it, Dad, even if it was hard." Holding his daughter close, Thatcher caught sight of Vivian standing in the doorway, watching them with an expression of complex emotion. Pride, wistfulness, and perhaps a hint of something that might, with time and continued healing, evolve into forgiveness. In that moment, surrounded by the remains of the life he had destroyed, and the new one that had unexpectedly grown from its ashes, Thatcher Blackwood understood the true nature of wealth, not measured in offshore accounts or market valuations, but in second chances, hard-won wisdom, and a daughter's embrace that contained both his past and his future in its innocent strength. It was enough, more than enough. It was everything. If this story touched your heart and you want to keep following inspiring and moving stories, be sure to check out our upcoming videos. Subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications to stay updated on new content that can brighten your journey and provide valuable insights. Join us and keep exploring stories that truly matter. I'm sure the next video that pops up on your screen will touch you as well, so click on it now and we'll see you there.